So my plan for today was to go ahead and do a little bit of daily space because as of right now Pamela's unavailable, and so I wanted to go ahead and cover a little bit of the updates on the James Webb Space Telescope. All right, it's good to hear. So let's get that.
The success of implementing the recommended corrective actions for the human errors and embedded problems factors will determine the success of completing the JWST development. Human problems or mistakes made by people working on the flight hardware or developers of procedures that dictate how work on the flight hardware is to be conducted. Three examples of human errors that have had a major impact upon the schedule and cost are wrong solvent used to clean propulsion valves, test wiring error that caused excessive voltage to be applied to transducers, and sunshield cover fasteners improperly installed. The solvent problem could have been resolved by checking the appropriateness of the solvent with the valve vendor. Following the procedure requiring that the wiring be independent validated would have eliminated this issue. Eliminating errors in the procedure for installing the fasteners would have prevented this problem. All simple fixes that were not implemented resulted in approximately a 1.5 year schedule delay and a cost of about $600 million. Corrective action requires training, personnel certification, discipline, high-quality procedures, and assuring a failure-proof safety net is available to assure human errors that occur in the future are caught before any schedule impact. In summary, the capabilities of the integration and test workforce and the quality of procedures must be such that human errors are minimized, and when they occur, the impact is negligible. Embedded problems are problems in the as-built hardware that are undetected until a major systems test many months in the future after the problem has actually been introduced, or, worst case, discovered during mission operations. The valve solvent problem and the fastener problem are examples of embedded problems that had a major impact on schedule. An in-depth audit of the flight hardware, drawings, procedures, etc., is necessary to identify any additional embedded problems or issues, or basically determining that no such embedded problems currently exist. Launch, spacecraft deployments, and sunshield deployments are risk areas that require special attention prior to commissioning the observatory for science operations. The deployments are clearly the highest risk in the commissioning phase of JWST. Commissioning is similar to entry, descent, and lander for a Mars lander mission, in that it is high risk with many single-point failures, and it cannot be tested as you fly because the necessary environments cannot be replicated in a test chamber. A world-class systems engineer, EDL manager, has been determined to be critical to the success of the Mars landers. The IRB recommends the position of commissioning manager, staffed by a world-class systems engineer, be established for JWST. This particular position would have cross-cutting responsibilities to do whatever is necessary to assure that commissioning is a success. There are a total of 32 recommendations to maximize the probability of JWST mission success in our report. To repeat my opening statement, JWST is an observatory with incredible capability, awesome scientific potential, and significant complexity, risk, and first-time events. The complexity and risk cannot be overstated or overestimated. Our recommended March 2021 launch date assumes the successful implementation of the recommendations in our report. No allowance has been made for additional INT errors and embedded problems with multi-month impacts. Additional sunshield deployments beyond the currently planned 2, or removal of a spacecraft subsystem or science instrument. With all the factors that I've discussed considered, the IRB believes that JWST should continue because of the compelling science and because of JWST's national importance. With that, I'd like to introduce John Mather to talk about the JWST science.
Thank you, Tom. The Webb Telescope is NASA's most ambitious and complex space observatory ever built and will deliver amazing science complementing the spectacular scientific discoveries already made by the Hubble Space Telescope, beginning to be made by the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite and other space science missions. The Webb Telescope is an unprecedented engineering feat. Its enormous size and highly sophisticated instruments were built to accomplish the ambitious scientific goals outlined in the National Academy of Sciences 2000 Decadal Survey, to answer the most fundamental questions about our cosmic origins. To meet its goals, a cryogenic observatory of unprecedented size and instrument sophistication was required. Webb is designed as a general-purpose observatory which will pick up the thread of scientific investigations where Hubble will leave off, writing a new chapter in cosmic history. Using infrared spectroscopy at unparalleled sensitivity and resolution to detect the faint infrared light of astronomical objects, Webb's discoveries will revolutionize and enrich our understanding of the universe and our cosmic origins, helping to answer questions like, are we alone in the universe? Webb's world-class science, from detecting light from the first stars and galaxies in the distant universe to probing the atmospheres in nearby exoplanets for possible signs of habitability, will underpin many other astrophysics projects with high-caliber capabilities to enhance their own science return. Thank you, and back to Thomas.
Two of those, right? Well, thanks, John, and really thanks for your comments. I want to just remind ourselves that Webb has achieved many key milestones. The hardware is complete, sitting there in one and the same place, and every time I look at it, I think of the hundreds and in fact thousands of individuals who poured their heart and soul into making that success a reality thus far. But there's more to do, and that is mostly focused on the spacecraft element, like Tom just told us. The other half of the observatory, other than the optical telescope, which is fully complete, that spacecraft has to undergo final testing. It will be integrated then with the optical telescope. And then, of course, the full observatory will undergo a set of challenging environmental tests before it gets shipped to its launch site. Ensuring that every element of Webb functions properly before it gets to space is critical to the success and at the very heart of the recommendations that Tom talked to us about. He talked about 32 recommendations that he gave us, and you saw our detailed response that we fully agree with 30 of those recommendations. Actually, have already started implementing that. There's 2 recommendations in which it's more complex than frankly what we had time in the last 10 days to deal with after we got the report. And of course, we fully agree with the intent of the recommendations, but we intend to really get to the end of the analysis of how exactly we're responding to it. And before we take questions, I want to remind you that at NASA, we do this kind of stuff, these impossibilities, new things we've never done before every day. And it's our goal and our job to achieve great things for space explorations. We have to get this right here on the ground before we go to space. And I just want to reemphasize that Webb is worth the wait. Over to you, Dwayne.
Thank you all. Now we're going to transition into Q&A. And for those who have just joined us, this is a media teleconference to give an update on the Webb Space Telescope and overview of the Webb Independent Review Board report. Again, there are several things on social media and, of course, the NASA response, and the IRB report is online at www.nasa.gov. Operator, if we can transition into Q&A, please.
Certainly. Again, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 on your touch-tone phone, unmute your phone, record your name clearly after the prompt, and I will introduce you for your question. That's *1 to ask a question. If you need to withdraw your question, you may press *2. Your first question comes from Jeff Foss with Space News. Sir, your line is open.
Hi. From my understanding, the new cost estimate breaches the $8 billion congressional cost cap for the development of James Webb Space Telescope. What is the process you will have to go through to get the mission formally reauthorized with a new cost cap or other changes? Thanks.
Yeah, so first the process started with us submitting a breach report to Congress in March once we got the SRB findings on schedule and realized we would breach on schedule. Subsequently, given the replan, we've also breached on cost, the $8 billion cost cap. So we've submitted our final breach report to Congress this week. And then it is true that Congress will have to reauthorize Webb through this next cycle of appropriations.
And Jeff, that was Steve Jwst that was speaking. Next question, please.
Our next question comes from Bill Harwood with CBS News. Your line is open.
Thanks. And I would like to follow up on Jeff's question. Steve, if you could give us some sense of what the initial reaction has been. I know you don't have any answer yet, but I mean, I'm wondering if there's any concern that this might start running into some opposition on the Hill. As this cost, I think you're now up to what it costs to buy a Ford-class aircraft carrier. So I'm just curious what you think the climate is to support this latest breach. Thanks.
This is Thomas Serbuchen. I sat in every meeting with all the stakeholders, including appropriators, authorizers, and also our stakeholders in the White House. And I think it's too early to really give an exact sense of what's happening there. Generally speaking, what I do believe that was present in every one of these discussions is the belief that the science is really compelling and remains compelling as we go forward. But I think it would be premature to give beyond that a real sense of where we're going.
Next question.
Our next question comes from Marcia Dunn with Associated Press. Your line is open.
Yes, this might be best for Mr. Young. I understand that in the test where all the fasteners came off, that there were more than 70 pieces lost and 2 are still inside the telescope, and that the delay is running NASA about $1 million a day. Do those numbers sound right? And I guess for anybody, how mad are you guys at Northrop Grumman?
I'll answer the first part of the question. I think what you said is correct. You know that of the hardware that was determined to have been loose and therefore not in its initial configuration, all but actually 4 pieces of it have actually been discovered, with some chance that 2 of the 4 have actually been discovered, but it cannot be uniquely say that they have been. So that's correct. And I think the cost that you identify is approximately the cost that exists of like $1 million a day in schedule delay.
This is Thomas answering your second question. Make no mistake, I'm not happy sitting here having this to share this story. We never want to do this. We always want to talk about the successes that we have. And if you look at our inventory of missions, you see how many times we deliver missions below the cost and on schedule. And we're really excited about this. I don't know whether mad is the right word, but the point is we're part of this team that has created this problem we're in. Now, of course, Northrop is part of this, but we have oversight of this, so we take responsibility as well as we go forward. And that's the only way we're going to bring this over the finish line together at the state that will truly make it flight worthy.
Our next question comes from Dennis Overby with the New York Times. Your line is open.
I'm not sure who this is for, but I've always been confused about the cost estimates. So the original cap was $8 billion, but then I've seen $8.7 billion or some reference to $8.8 billion earlier today. How does this all work?
So the cost cap that we were under, basically from Congress, has been $8 billion for development. So that includes all development of all the hardware, integration and test, launch, and 6 months of commissioning. So that was $8 billion estimate for all of that. Given the delay in the launch and implementing the recommendations from the IRB, that will add another $800 million to the development cost. So the cap will have to for development will have to go from $8 billion to $8.8 billion.
Our next question comes from Dan Bragano with BuzzFeed News. Your line is open.
Hi, this is a question for Thomas Young. How much confidence do you have that there won't be further delays in the mission? You say that the report doesn't account for sunshield problems or more embedded things turning up. This is the latest delay in a series of them. How much confidence do you feel we can tell our readers that March 30, 2021 is going to be the right date?
We have two recommendations that are directed towards the question that you're asking. One is human errors. And our basic recommendation is aimed towards not eliminating human errors, minimizing them, but because humans are involved, you can expect the errors. But they're really aimed towards if a human error occurs, that it is caught by a safety net of either testing or inspection or some other kind of activity. Actually, the state of the art of doing integration and testing is such that you can do that. In other words, you really can, in our view, one, you can minimize them, but you can also, by appropriate discipline, training, procedures, you can minimize any impact that they have. So if that recommendation is rigorously implemented, then it will have a very positive result on confidence in the launch date. The second is embedded problems, and we've had two significant ones. And I don't think anybody can tell us today, are there any more embedded problems that are there, which says that our recommendation and what the project is currently doing is aimed at kind of going back through everything that's been done on JWST to see if there can be any indication of embedded problems that exist today. If they're there and they can be found by this rigorous process, then they can be solved before they become a significant schedule impact. We believe that can be done, but that is a more difficult challenge than the first one, but it's an important item to do. So in summary, if the recommendation on human errors and the recommendation on embedded problems is rigorously implemented, which I expect they will be, then I think we have a very high probability of preventing them in the future of having significant schedule impacts. I don't think anybody can say that you can make that go to zero, but you can make it go to a small number.
Our next question comes from John Amos with BBC. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks for doing this. Can you just tell us something about the discussions that you've had with European and Canadian partners on the project? And also, can I just confirm that 9.66 does not include the costs borne by Europe and Canada, which I think are about $500 million or something?
This is Thomas Zurbuchen. You're correct on the last statement. I don't know what the exact number is, but you're correct that it's not including European cost. You should know that the moment I got the recommendations from the independent review board, and it truly was independent, so in other words, it was news to me when I got the recommendation at the date that was already indicated. The moment I got that, I actually took a plane to Europe literally days after, and I met with my counterpart at ESA, and we basically talked through this, including the implication of some of the recommendations that involve both of us. I did a similar type of meeting with Canada shortly thereafter, and you should know that we will go forward together as a team, just like how we got to where we are right now, really is a true partnership with an international partnership that got us here. So so we are staying connected and will implement the recommendations and the response to these recommendations as we go forward. You should know that even just yesterday, our team focused on launch systems was in Europe meeting with our counterparts there to really discuss at the level of detail well below where I usually spend my time about the impact of these recommendations.
Our next question comes from Sarah Kaplan with the Washington Post. Your line is open.
Hi, I'm wondering if you could talk about what this means for future missions, particularly Jwst. The fact, I know that does the additional or the budget increase and the delay mean anything for JWST's successors?
This is Thomas again. Webb is part of our astrophysics program, and it was the highest priority of the National Academy back 2 reports ago, and the last report had Wst or a similar mission to Wst as the highest priority. The way we do this, and even on the last one, the highest priority recommendation of this decade was to complete the mission Webb, and so basically the highest priority for us going forward is to complete Webb, followed then by other recommendations. We'll do so by also keeping in mind other recommendations that came from this body, which is that we should do so in a balanced fashion, namely that we don't forget that there's PI class missions as well as research and development and technology development that can set us up for success in the future. The exact question that you're asking, however, is not, there's multiple stakeholders that ultimately decide how these things will go forward. Ultimately, funds get appropriated on the Hill, and so we look forward to discussions that are precisely focused on this.
Our next question comes from Mark Carreau of Aviation Week and Space Technology. Your line is open.
Thank you. My questions go back to the beginning of the question and answer. First, with regard to the reauthorization, is that something you're seeking in the current legislative cycle, or do you have to wait till 2020? And my related question is, given the current appropriations, I guess we're in 2018, is there sufficient money to start executing the response, or do you have to wait until there's an authorization, a reauthorization to do that?
So your first question is, we'd be seeking, reauthorization of Webb in the current cycle. We don't think we need to wait till the 2020 cycle. That's number one. The second is, we'll be able to move forward with implementing the recommendations from the IRB immediately, because we have the funds in 2019, as proposed in 2019's President's budget request to do that. So there's no additional funds required in 2019, in part because we were underrunning our current against our current plan, and we can carry funds forward to cover that. But we will need additional money funding for this plan in 2020 and 2021, and we're in the process of defining our budget request for 2020 right now, and that we'll build that into our request, and that'll go to the White House according to the normal process in early September, and then it'll be released by the president in nominally early February of next year.
And operator, this is Dwayne. We're going to take a few more questions from the media, and then we're having a lot of conversation on social media on the complexity and the compelling science. So we'll take 3 or 4 more media questions, and I'll take some social media questions. And a reminder for the folks out there: use the hashtag #AskNASA.
Okay.
Back to you, Jennifer.
Your next question comes from Greg Redfern with WTOP Radio. Your line is open.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up on the fasteners and hardware found. Was that during some kind of vibration test, or can you tell us a little bit about how that was found, what it means, and has the cable looseness for the sun shield deployment been fixed and the tears? Thank you.
The answer to your first question is it was done as a part of the acoustics test performed on the spacecraft sun shield combination. And the acoustic test is to simulate the environment that the system will see when it's inside the shroud on the launch vehicle during the propulsion phase of the mission. So it was during that particular time that these fasteners obviously came loose, and the stray hardware was the result of that. So it was a system level test of a major part of the system. Remind me of the second part of your question.
Loose cables and repairs.
The loose cables and repairs have been, the corrections from the first deployment fold have been implemented, and demonstrating that indeed the problem has been solved will really result in the second deployment and full operation, which will take place later in the overall test program.
Our next question comes from Mike Wall with Space.com. Your line is open.
Thank you for doing this. Just a quick question. Could you lay out in a little detail what the kind of development schedule is kind of going forward? I mean, what are the next major milestones? And like in terms of like testing and like integration, and when will you like kind of get a good idea if you're still on track for the 2021 launch date?
So what's happening right now, this is Thomas, is that we're right in the middle of coming back from this fastener issue that was already discussed in detail. We will then, within just a few weeks and months, in fact, basically move into going back into the cycle, very likely going back to the acoustics testing to make sure that we've fully passed that before we go into vibe and thermal vacuum testing of the subsystem. Then there come deployments that relate to this, and then of course the observatory integration. So basically, and then of course the whole gamut of tests of the entire observatory. So basically, for us, the overall schedule through this summer is really coming back entirely from this fastener issue, doing the acoustics test, and then really starting the test program going forward later in the summer, in October.
Our next question comes from Stephen Clark with Space Flight Now. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. Probably for Tom Young. Interested in what you found in your review that led to the March 30th, 2021 launch date versus the May 2020 date, which NASA had set back in March. Did you find something new in your review, or is it just additional conservatism in the schedule? And also, do you have a confidence level attached to the March 30th, 2021 date? Thank you.
The answer to the latter question is it's an 80-20 launch date, meaning it's an 80% confidence. But I think the real difference, there are a collection of difference. One is the May date, when we examined it and when we went through risk and threats and issues that existed in our assessment of the probability of them occurring, it was our assessment that still too much optimism had been built into the schedule. So when we implemented what in our view was a more realistic assessment as to the time it would take to do these various events, that was one factor. The other thing that we did look at was we looked at both past performance of the integration and test team at Northrop Grumman and the forecasted performance as you go forward. And so that combination of factors would have caused, in our view, the May date to have been moved somewhat to the right, independent of problems. The second item that really occurred was the fastener problem, which has added multi-months, something neighborhood of round numbers of 6 months to the schedule. So I'd say that in summary, the things that we identified was eliminating too much optimism giving respect to the complexity of the vehicle and the fact that the fastener problem occurred and the anticipated amount of time it would take to implement that.
And operator, this is Dwayne. We're going to transition over to social media, and we're getting some interesting science traffic, and then we'll go back to the media on this call. And so, Dr. Mather, this is a couple of questions. Explain in simple terms what the public should expect from Webb Science.
So we are planning to look at everything that we can, beginning with the first stars and galaxies and black holes that formed after the Big Bang, to looking at planets here in the solar system and the comets and asteroids, so we can begin to understand our whole history. Where did we all come from? How did it all work? It's only a century since we discovered that the universe is expanding, and so everything we're working on is brand new to humanity. So the mystery and wonder of it all is something we're going to try to outline and see if we can understand how we got here.
Another question, how is the science community feeling about this latest situation?
I would say we're certainly annoyed that we have to wait, because that telescope seemed like it was right away, coming soon, and we have already decided what to do with the first half year of observations. So we're going to have to wait, but on the other hand, I think we're really pleased that we're going to make sure that it works. It will be worth the wait.
One last question before we go back to the media on the call. And this is from Gene. I'll just say Gene. Gene, I apologize, but I know you all are listening on the call. So this gets into the launch vehicle. Will the launch vehicle Ariane 5 still be available? And is there any talk of flying on any other European vehicles or even the SLS?
We are assured by our ESA colleagues that the launch vehicle, as foreseen, will be available.
Okay, operator, we'll transition back into the media on the call.
Okay, our next question comes from Marina Korn with The Atlantic. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you. My question follows up on Marsha's about Northrop Grumman. Will there be any consequences for Northrop Grumman, and if so, what will they be? And how will what you've learned from this experience inform the level of oversight that NASA has for contractors on future projects?
Yeah, so this is a very large, complex systems development. On these types of projects, we have cost plus contracts with our contractors, and this is one that we have with Northrop Grumman. So on a regular basis, every 6 months, we lay out a performance plan for them that we evaluate them on, and then they earn award fee, which is their profit based on their performance. So their award fees have reflected their performance in the previous periods, and they'll reflect performance moving forward. And that's how we hold them accountable and reward them for good performance and not for not so good performance. On the oversight, for this project, we've already, actually previous to the IRB recommendations, deployed more NASA engineers, some to work with Northrop Grumman on many of the actions that were taken to ensure mission success. Some of them actually have been redeployed off of the successful development of the optical telescope and instrument system, OTIS. Others have been drawn from the engineering ranks at Goddard, and they're not only working more with Northrop Grumman engineers, but also have more of a physical presence out at Northrop Grumman in Redondo Beach, California.
Our next question comes from Jason Ryan with Space Flight Insider. Your line is open.
Yes, thanks for taking my question. You mentioned redeployment of personnel. The JWST was I think known in the past as the NGST, and that's been under development since 1996, and now we're hearing that JWST won't launch until 2021. Given that 25 years is normally the retirement span of one's career, what, if any, issues have you had with folks actually that were working on the project retiring during the course of its development? Thank you.
Interestingly enough, we regularly have NASA employees stay with the agency for 30, 35, and 40 years. Our attrition rate is about 3% per year, our natural attrition. Among scientists and engineers, it's more like 1.2%. So we have, over the years, been able to retain a critical mass of scientists and engineers that have been able to work on this over throughout its development, and so that has not been a challenge for us.
Our next question comes from Mark Sellinger with Defense Daily. Your line is open.
Thank you. Hi. I was just wondering, since the U.S. Air Force relies pretty heavily on this part of Northrop Grumman, whether they've been briefed on what you found, whether you've shared any information with them about things that they should be aware of in developing their own systems.
Thanks for your question. This is Thomas. Yes. This is actually one of the real values of the Space Council we have right now. You should know that there are discussions that were had with several participating agencies that were focused on this particular issue. I would not be surprised if there will be follow-up discussions, but I personally have met with some of representatives of the agencies that we referred to, but the short answer is yes, they have been fully briefed and are aware of this. You should also know that where appropriate, we are aware of what their experiences are with the same contractor, and that's not that unusual. This is literally the discussion that the Space Council has really truly enabled and we're benefiting from.
Our next question comes from Chris Gebhardt with NASA Spaceflight. Your line is open.
Yeah, thanks for doing this and for taking my question. I want to go back to the launch vehicle. You said that you've been told that Ariane 5 will still be available, but we know Arianespace is wanting to phase out the Ariane 5 in preparation for the Ariane 6 or in favor of Ariane 6 in 2020. So are you saying that James Webb will 100%, no matter the launch date, go on an Ariane 5 rocket, or is there a possibility of it being switched to the Ariane 6 given the timeline?
The answer I gave was in the context of the replan that we have here. The replan that puts this launch in, up to March of 21. I have not personally had a discussion beyond that and a discussion, on the outside of that framework, which I wouldn't know how to have that discussion because it's not well bounded. In this context, that's where in this context is where my answer came from, an answer that we got in no uncertain terms, both from ESA but also from Arianespace, the relevant private contractor in Europe.
Our next question comes from Sarah Kaplan with Washington Post. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks for taking a second question. I was just, going back to this idea of an excess of optimism. I mean, you look at the history of JWST, and it was initially conceived as kind of a fast, low-cost idea, and it's very obviously has not been that. Is there, sort of a lesson here about, the kinds of projects that NASA takes on, maybe did NASA bite off more than it could chew with JWST, or sort of, how does this, something that was supposed to launch in 2007 become what we have today?
I do think that there's many lessons in Webb, and you should know about lessons that in many cases we've already implemented. That the key consequences or the key conclusions of the 2011 replan that we've really benefited from have brought us management systems and processes that we're benefiting from in every one of the missions we're currently doing in science. And so we have benefited from that going forward. Make no mistake, we'll look carefully at what we're learning from this one and also try to generalize it not only within science but across the agency and really learning about what we can do. I do believe the question you're asking will be at the center of such a consideration is how big a bite should we take? How big a leap is possible in a single mission? I think that's a question that we're always asking. Make no mistake, we want to take leaps. Otherwise, we're not NASA. We want to develop new technologies, new systems, doing new science or going to new places. That's not, we're not confused about that. But how big a bite should we take is really something that we're asking across the board and really are trying to learn how to do it the right way. But thanks for the question. That's something that we're spending a lot of time thinking about.
Our final question on the phone comes from Ken Kramer with Space Up Close. Your line is open.
Thanks for taking my question and for doing this. Yeah, I've got a question. I'd like to know from Tom Young. Can you explain how was the wrong solvent used? I kind of can't really comprehend this. Was it mislabeled? Was it wrong in the operating procedure? And why was that not found in the operating procedures by reviews? And for John Mather, any retesting of the science instrument since we got a 3-year delay? Thanks.
It's a good question that you ask. And my understanding, it was so simple as the people who were doing the cleaning of the valves basically took a solvent that was available. That was there was a procedure that was not clear as to solvent use or not solvent use, and they proceeded to take that particular solvent and clean the valves. The mistake that was made was not validating that it was a compatible solvent. And the way that you would validate it would be to go back to the vendor and ask the vendor, we need to clean these valves, and what is the appropriate solvent, or we're about to use this solvent, is that an acceptable solvent? And that did not happen. Now, the real aspect of your question is, I wish there was a different answer that I could give to the question, because this is a mistake that really should not have happened. And even after it happened, there was still an opportunity to go back to the vendor and say, we've cleaned the valve, and did we use the right solvent? And the reason I'm kind of, one, thanking you for the question, and two, amplifying the answer is preventing that as we go forward in the future. Those kinds of mistakes is what's going to be critical to the success of the development of JWST.
Okay, we are going to take 2 more questions from social media, and actually, before that, John Mather.
Yeah, so Ken, you also asked, are we going to test the instrument package anymore? And the answer is yes, we do test it while it's warm to make sure all the things that should function when they are warm do function. So we'll do that several times between now and launch. We are not planning to take it back to the cryogenic test, which is very difficult, and we already know what we need to know from that test.
We're going to take 2 more questions from social media. I'll turn it over to Thomas Zabukin for some closing remarks, and then operator, I'll wrap up before turning it over to you. So,
are you guys able to hear me?
Last 2 questions here. What's the plan to make sure by at Jeffrey Ken? What's the plan to make sure there are no remaining pieces inside the telescope from the acoustic testing issue?
I think Tom already outlined that we're really close to finding every one of the pieces, and we're near certainty, but what we're going to do as we go forward actually is a detailed analysis and investigation that we're going forward, and as we go through the deployments, should there be one of these pieces that, let's say, was mislabeled or whatever, should any of these pieces be there, it will come to the surface. So we'll for sure see it. So that's what we'll do. So we'll remain focused on it until we're 100% confident that every one of these pieces has been found and that the issue is fully 100% resolved.
And John, for the last question, this is pretty interesting, and this goes into the compelling science. Compared to the very successful Hubble, will Webb do even better? I believe Hubble overran in cost too, but look what it gave human mankind.
Yes, Webb Telescope will do even far better because it's different. It's not only bigger and more powerful, but it also is cold, and it can pick up the infrared light that no other telescope can pick up for us. We've had smaller infrared telescopes in space, but this is magnificent and powerful, and we'll be able to see much farther out in space, much farther back in time, be able to look inside dust clouds where stars are being born, be able to look at planets around other stars as they pass in front of their own stars. So there are so many wonderful things we expect to get from this new observatory that we never could have done before.
Over to you, Thomas Zabukin, for closing comments, and then back to me to close out. Thomas.
Yeah, I know. Final comments, like he said. Look at the key points I wanted to just close this off with is to recognize how much has been done to get to where we are, and how grateful we are to the many individuals who have participated in that. I wanted to really thank again, Tom, you and your team. This was the only people who were there on this committee were already fully committed in whatever jobs they have, and over and above, they dropped everything and did this. The people here in my organization that were secretaries or supported this, I want to thank them as well. And with the input that we have and the good team that's working on it, I believe we do have a plan forward. And I do believe that what Dwayne said at the beginning is absolutely true, which is Webb is worth the wait. Thank you.
I want to thank our participants. I want to thank everyone on today's call. And a reminder, this entire telecon will be available for replay for 2 weeks. The number is 866-439-3741. Again, we have been talking about the status of the James Webb Space Telescope and an overview of the Webb Independent Review Board. The NASA response and the IRB report is online. The news release with the video links, and please look at the NASA administrator and his tweets and his message to the NASA family on his unwavering support. And of course, more information on Webb is at www.nasa.gov/Webb. Thank you for joining us today, and indeed, Webb is worth the wait. Over to you, operator.
This concludes today's conference. Thank you for your attendance. You may disconnect your line.
All right, guys, and that is the update on the James Webb Space Telescope. Okay, it's now 1 o'clock, and I foresee this discussion lasting more than or about an hour, actually. So, the plan, of course, was today to go ahead and after the conference to do the Astro 101 stream with me and Joe. However, I think I'm going to delay it until Friday. Let's look at the comments here. I apologize, Adam, but to give you guys a head up though of what's in store. Let's see. Upcoming Friday, we will be talking about the Milky Way and its main sequence stars. So I'm gonna save the discussion for Friday. However, before I end the stream, though, I do want to make a correction. In last week's stream, I made a mistake actually. So Hanny actually brought up a very good point with this diagram, more so about the dynamics of these points, these green points we're seeing in the diagram. So this is actually a depiction or an animation of Lagrange points for the Sun-Earth system. And so I wanted to make a quick correction in that what Hanny said was right, was like dead on. Basically, the idea is that if you could remember the old record players, all the points that are rotating around in this animation are rotating at the same angular velocity. However, I think what Hanny's question was more so related to was what's going on with the speeds of points 1 and 2 relative to the Earth. So points 3, 4, and 5 will all have the same angular velocity, and so will points 1 and 2. The only differences that will actually occur with points 1 and 2, given their physical separations from the sun in this animation, is that they will have different linear velocities because of their different orbital separations. And that was the correction I wanted to just quickly make. Thank you, Susie, for helping me put the corrections with the along with the YouTube and Twitch versions of last week's stream. So that's basically pretty much it for today, guys. We will be back next or this upcoming Friday. Pamela should be back as well. She'll do her daily space, or yeah, Pamela will do daily space, and after daily space, me and Joe will talk about the main sequence stars of the Milky Way. Guys, thanks for showing up, and thanks for your patience early on in the stream. There was some technical difficulties, and you guys stayed with us, so thank you. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream, and we will see you this upcoming Friday. All right, bye.